All right, so let's go ahead and get started with exercise 3 today. Just to cover it, obviously we're taking Rhino to the next step of using 3D and 2D, some materials, and different views. Obviously we have, as mentioned, kind of a D1 composition project. So the next exercise will begin our first project of the course. We will begin with a simple abstract diagramming to start to understand the iteration ability of the software and how it can be applied to Studio. The final will become a project worthy of portfolio with process and product to be sure to save your work constantly. That being said, if you are not doing this already, make sure that you're saving your files in 2 different locations, not just on a USB that could be lost or even washed or dried in the dryers, right? I can't tell you how many times I've lost really good information and had to do it the second time. Yes, it was better the second time, faster even the second time, but kind of a waste of time if you ask me. But in this case, we will be, for our first step of the project, basically need 3 11 by 17s. Really still no scale here, right? So we're not really talking about scale. We'll turn it into scale once we start getting into some stairs and ramps and things like that, because those obviously have dimensions to them. This one still doesn't, and I'd rather that you be essentially sculptural for this assignment. Obviously, we're given it 2 weeks. I know it says next Tuesday is the due date, but more than likely it'll be pushed to Thursday. This one does usually take a little bit longer. However, we'll probably still introduce assignment 4 because that one's actually pretty short, where we go over stairs and ramps and things like this. However, I've added some imagery, really just to kind of help remind us that composition is about balance. It's about keeping object hierarchy and really a tension between them and the space, right? So object and space. You may have had Kernodle and the figure ground may come back to haunt you and things like this. Some of us worked in Rockite with this principle and all kinds of things. But really, it is the exact same assignment, right? Deciding what rhythm they should have or really what should be dominating visually. From there, we'll actually make it 3-dimensional. We'll start to use Gumball and actually, more or less, make a 3D model without having to make anything in reality, which is a huge plus in terms of our pocketbooks. However, let's just go ahead and start getting started. In my case, I'm just going to I could either copy this, I could actually do something of, what I see outside of, say, a 10 by 10. But let's start maybe off with the instructions. So, abstract composition, create a 30 by 30 square frame to compose in 2-dimensional operations. Fairly easy. I'm going to start off with my 30 by 30. I've essentially put assignment 1 and assignment 2 up here. You're more than welcome to do something like that, right? Just because a lot of this stuff really starts to take up our processing speed. So I'm going to type in hide and start off with a fresh start. In my case, I want to make a rectangle and make it 30 by 30. So I'm going to type in 30 feet by 30 feet. Voila. What's next? Oh, let's put this on another page, actually, so I can just swipe through. There we go. Create a 5 by 5 grid system that references as center points. Okay, still 2-dimensional operation. So step 2, I need to turn this into some sort of grid system. To be fair, I could just start drawing lines and trim away. That would be one way that I definitely did it. But what I mean by this is definitely 5 grid lines, not necessarily 5 spaces. So for instance, I could copy this 1, 2, 3, and 5. All right, so we're actually going to get 6 grid spaces. And we could quite literally take the exact same thing, copy, enter, I can copy it in place and just rotate it, and instantly have a grid. I could then take everything and trim. So that would definitely be one way to solve it. And don't get me wrong, we could do something like that for today. However, I do want to try just a couple different things, and I want to show you that we can do a little bit more than just that. So in my case, I'm going to copy another 30 by 30 because, well, I need 3 iterations eventually. I could do them one at a time, or I could realize, hey, this program has the ability to copy, right? So of course, maybe I actually do some of my steps all together, right? I make all 3 grids at one time. I make all 3 sculptures at one time. Those kinds of things. But let's say I didn't want to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and explode, and maybe I want something that's actually exact. So I'm going to take this line, I'm going to type in divide, and I can divide it by any set of points. In my case, maybe 5, right? Awesome. So I'm going to take those 5 lines, and I'm just going to include my outside line as one of those grid spaces. So in my case, I could just actually take this line, copy, and done. No trimming, nothing of the sort. And sorry, I misspoke. You do want 5 bays, not 5 lines. So not a big deal. I'll just get rid of that one. I meant to say 5 by 5. Yeah, so 5 spaces by 5 spaces. It's not really, I mean, if you choose 6, it's not the end of the world. But you will run into some issues later. And to be fair, we're going to delete and add stuff later on anyway. So not super imperative. But what is nice here is that we can do different things. So divide. And again, I can divide it by 5 and copy that line. So copy. And what's nice about this is, I know for anyone in Graphics 1 or Graphics 2, you're thinking like, man, you know how long that would take me if I had to do this by hand, right? To make perfect, absolute. What's also nice is that it will make some points for you. You don't have to keep the points if you don't want to. I don't necessarily want to today, even though it is nice that they're auto-generated from divide. That's also a checkbox, so you can turn that off as well. But that one's pretty good. And, you know, what if I don't want to do that all over again? I could just copy it and start to move things, maybe based on, I don't know, visual hierarchy. So in my case, I like the golden ratio. So I'm going to draw a line just because I know how to draw the golden ratio. I'm going to rotate and make that a golden line. So I'm going to move that piece to over here. I'm going to mirror this one just because I can. Maybe the midpoint. Oh, got to get the midpoint involved. Sweet. So I'm going to take that one over there, get that one. And now I have some golden ratio involved. There's another square, so I'm going to go ahead and take the midpoint of there. I can't, so I'm going to make a midpoint. Again, rotate. Just in case you didn't know how to draw the golden ratio. I know if you're in my D1, you definitely know. And you'll see that we line up actually with other lines, funny enough. So I'm going to move that one as well and lock it into place. I mean, why not? I mean, I could also get crazy with the spices. And we make it a little offset to give some visual hierarchy. Now this red line is kind of getting in the way, so I'll move that up. But just like that, I've completed step 1 and step 2, even though I need 3 different iterations. So again, use the program to make things go faster, right? In my case, I already have 3 grids. I'm just going to do one for the sake of tutorial, otherwise we'd be here all day. And a good reason. This project usually does take about 2 weeks to really fully comprehend, but I'm going to go with the golden ratio one for today. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And let's see what's next. Using only 12 lines, 6 orthogonal planes, and 3 curved lines and 3 points, compose your abstract diagram. Now, no, I'm not going to sit here and actually count each of y'all's lines, but it's a rough budget, a rough ballpark, if you will, right? Maybe I can only afford 12 walls, and maybe I can only afford 6 planes. However, if you had to go outside or inside that boundary, use at your own discretion, right? Eventually, we will be laser cutting these or 3D printing them, right? So they will eventually at least mean some dollars, right? Let's full screen it over here. Nobody needs to see my desktop all day. Awesome. So from here, let's go ahead and compose. I'm going to go ahead and start off with another layer. So I'm going to go to my layers, new layer, and let's say lines in composition. Sweet. I'm going to make those, I don't know, green for today. That stands out pretty well. And there's actually a couple different ways if you haven't even tested around them yet. We have the polyline that I haven't really got to go over. Make sure you double click on your layer. And let's compose. I mean, after all, that's pretty interesting. I can offset things still. So let's say I'm going to offset it. I kind of want some rhythm involved. And maybe I want to offset it a little bit more, or even delete some. And that would be fine too. It does say I need 12 of them, so another way that I can make a line is just, of course, typing line. So I'm going to say 1. I can hit spacebar and, of course, reenact the same. And I can even use my smart tools such as Smart Track. And in fact, it's going to line up some stuff for me if you guys haven't started using it already. So for instance, you can lock onto something and then move it. Very similar to AutoCAD. That way, our composition is in balance. Another great tool is that we can move these things. So I can make them touch the frame if I'd like to, or even extend the lines to do so. So I've already got 4 lines. All right, let's keep going. Maybe get some more poly lines in there. Maybe I lock on to one of those lines. Go all the way across the page. I mean, after all, I suppose a poly line is still a line. But you'll see there's not a lot of straight qualities to this. I am also allowed 3 curves, and to be fair, there's multiple ways to make curves. If you haven't done it already, arc is pretty fantastic actually. There's multiple ways to make different arcs. But in our case, by default, it starts off with a center of the arc, right? So center, maybe that's my edge, and I can pull this all the way across. Nicely enough, I can also still move it and further compose it. Alright, some of you in my D1 are like, what? We could have done this the whole time? And maybe, I don't know, I like the alignment of things, so I'm going to align it a little bit and of course trim. After all, I'm just making some art for today and some sculpture. I don't really have to worry too much about, is it going to impress my professors and things like this. I'm not going to grade it for its design, but really its implication of the software, right? I don't know, maybe I want to use this and mirror it, so I can totally mirror something. Coco Chanel comes to mind. But that's pretty nice. A little too much tension there for me. So I'm going to spread that out a little bit. And I need one last curve, so I'm going to go with a circle. To be fair, there's actually a million ways to make a circle. So again, a lot of the reasons I'm bringing some of this up, guys, is so that you actually try some other things out. In fact, some of you might actually even get stuck in your ways like I did. Like I didn't realize there was like 12 different ways to make a circle. One of my favorite ways to make a circle is 3 points. You just type in 1, 2, 3. I love that, by the way. No cooler way in the world to make a circle. But I'm going to go with some hierarchy. I already have kind of 2 big circles going on, so I kind of want to fill in this area over here. And I'm going to say that's my 3 curves. I do need a couple more lines, so let's go ahead and do so. And I don't know, I'm going for a weird one. I also know where this project is going, so I'm kind of trying to help myself out a little bit here. And try to compose at least somewhat nicely. But you'll notice what I'm doing there is using Smart Track. I'm holding shift because I know it's going to stay orthogonal, but then I'm also using Smart Track and those gray lines to really line up some things, right? Something that I would have done in Composition 1, right? Or sorry, Design 1. Some of this stuff, it looks like it got a little out of order, and that's okay. I can take that point and fake it till I make it. It's still not quite right. And if that be the case, I can always explode the line and make it again, right? In fact, actually, that looks kind of nice. You know what? Turned out pretty nice. I also got 2 lines out of it, so not too shabby. But more or less, I have a design here. The last thing that I need is maybe some intricate spaces, or I think I need 6 orthogonal planes. So what I mean by that is, try not to make this kind of plane. Beware. I mean, you totally can, but I'd only make one of them because you'll totally hate yourself later. I always seem to make a foot or a bowling pin anyway. So try not to make super curvilinear lines. I would say try to keep it within some sort of mathematical principle, like for instance 2 arcs that come together, or maybe a delicate spine. In fact, they would say in D1 or D2, especially my class, we were never allowed to draw curves, which is why I don't let you in D1. Because I had a teacher that said curves can actually be done wrong. In fact, the only right curve is one that is found in nature. And I would have to agree, the ones found in nature are quite beautiful, right? But if you're sitting there making up curves, you're going to end up with kind of a bad curvilinear car, if you will. And she would argue the same. But this is looking pretty good for composition. Again, I need 3 of them, so I might actually produce, or even actually, if you make 3 grids, they don't all have to be different, but they can be, right? But for instance, maybe I really like my golden ratio that I've got going on. So I'm going to hold that to site. Again, you can use Smart Track to line up 2 things, and that's pretty nice too, right? Obviously, I like to keep things in order. But yes, you can either use the same grids or use completely different grids. What I would say is please don't add diagonals to your grids. And you'll, of course, see why when we get into the 3-dimensional. But from here, I need some orthogonal planes, and there's a couple ways I can do that. In fact, I can use actually multiple shapes, and or I can use, we align that up and align that up. You'd be surprised how easier this is with some smart tracking tools. In my case, I'm going to make it off the page, and I want to hatch it. So I'm going to hatch it, which is basically filling it in. In my case, I'm going to keep it solid for today because that's going to make Illustrator way easier. So yes, if you haven't written down hatch, it's your best friend. You might as well say equals to poche or, everything like that. But you can do all of that work, and we simply change the color, bless you, or the line weight in Illustrator. We don't have to use the Live Paint tool. I mean, it's a good tool, but it kind of messes up line weights and things like this. I could copy it, right? Maybe I'm going for some sort of balance, and maybe some visual hierarchy, right? So maybe actually that one's a little bit smaller. Maybe it aligns with the grid. If you guys remember my D1, we even walk around the school and point out all the terrible things, but I kind of want to mirror this one. Sorry, I'm being a little too artsy-fartsy today, but that's just me naturally. I kind of want to line up some things. After all, 1, 2, 3, I need 6 of them. I don't know, I kind of want to break the rules a little bit. Maybe we just have a basic square in there. Nothing wrong with a basic square. In fact, maybe we actually line up to the grid. Why not? Or a grid. So again, I'm going to click on it, hatch. Voila. No more poching required, right? I kind of want a circle in there just because I do have, there's nothing in the rules that say, well, I guess it does. It says orthogonal planes. So what about a polygon? So I can type in polygon. I can type in the number of sides. Maybe I want an octagon, so I'm going to go with 8 sides. And select my center point. And voila, you no longer have to make calculated you should have saw me the first time I was drawing a Rhino, guys. Like, I'd sit there and calculate, drawing all these things, and I had a friend come by and he was like, you can just type in polygon, right? And I'd be like, you son of a, right? I was always doing it the hard way, but I was just kind of going with my most intuitive side. But in my regard, again, what's really nice about this is I could even use the same shapes for this assignment, guys, and copy that entire thing. And well, let's try it, I don't know, this way. See what I mean? Whole nother composition. So you don't have to rethink the wheel here. No, you probably should do some due diligence and actually make 3 different models. Or at least move some stuff around, right? You start to test some things. But again, what a game changer for studio. What a game changer for portfolio design. What a game changer for now eventually 3-dimensional design. Now that's looking actually pretty sweet, but I think I am going to go with this one. So I'm going to go ahead and copy it. And at least for this assignment, I kind of like to keep these in steps. So if I go back to, I don't know, a different layer at least. Step 1. And we'll keep that a little bit smaller. Copy. Step 2 and step 3. And you don't necessarily have to do that. But you definitely want to keep track because we do want results for all 3 models. And yes, you have to make 3 models. However, as you can see, it's not as difficult as making 3 physical models out of thin air. But from here, let's say I had all the steps. I had the 12 lines, the 6 orthogonal planes, 3 curved, and 3 points. 3 points would be actually kind of nice, so I'm going to go ahead and type in point. And fake it till I make it. That's looking like a good point. Kind of like that as a point, and kind of like this being the connection between those two. Although there isn't, oh, there it is. I found the midpoint between 2. God, Smart Track, I didn't have that growing up in school, right? Smart Track was relatively new, maybe came out about 2 years ago. And boy, is it a game changer. Anyway, Smart Track of the day, just in case I haven't talked about it. But from there, we'll go ahead and extrude and cap an offset thickness of your lines, planes onto a grid of now 30 by 30 by 50. All right, well, that's kind of a lot going on here. So let's do actually this part first. I need to make a 30 by 30 by 50. And I'm immediately going into the 3-dimensional realm. So let's take a look at this in our 3-dimensional view. And you're like, where is it, right? So of course, in my case, I want to hyper focus on it. And there it is. I have this weird gray background going, so, oh, and that's why. I'm in some sort of rendered view. But really from here, I do need to establish kind of my extents, is what this is usually called. You would say this is the extents of the drawing, right? So in my case, why work harder when we can work smarter? I'm going to go ahead and use my Boolean per ratio. I'm not sure why I labeled it that, but again, using SmartTrack, and I can type in 50 feet. So there's my 50. I can draw it in 2 dimensions first and then just simply rotate it and move it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I guess I could use other views, but I don't necessarily have to. And I can also mirror that one, knowing some basic proofs, and mirror again. Of course, this only works if you have a perfect square, but now there's my extents. And relatively speaking, that's where I kind of want you to stay in the model, right? One of the first things it tells us is we need some sort of grid pattern, right? So your lines, your planes, and your grid. I'm going to go ahead and do that backwards because I think it's a little easier to see. So let's go ahead and make our grid first. And in my case, this would be that grid I have on the ground. Luckily, I chose some different materials, right? That way I can, of course, make that a lot easier, right? In my case, I probably should have done that to the points. Oh, I did do it to the points as well, thank goodness. But in my case, I need to make a grid, so one of those ways I could do that is simply pipe it, right? And go with maybe a 6 inches and call it a day. And it's actually kind of looking thick, especially for where I know this project is going. That may have been a 6-inch radius, which is actually making those 12 inches in diameter, which is honestly kind of a thick pole. So let's try that again and go with like 3. So if I did pipe, let's try 3 inches. And that's looking a little more iconic, definitely a little bit more realistic in a sense. However, maybe I don't want to just be, boring or anything like that. So maybe I actually want to get the square involved, and I totally can, right? Let's go with maybe a 6x6 and rotate that 90 degrees. And let's use my center point. So I'm going to move my center point. And again, you can find that center point with SmartTrack. And I can't tell you how much of an awesome tool it is, because if you guys have moved around in the perspective view, you definitely know it can be disorienting, and it's kind of hard, like sometimes going back and forth between different views. So if we're able to do that all in one view, especially on a laptop where you have limited real estate space, it can definitely make it easier. Now, to be fair, this square is not that much more interesting, but it is interesting. Another thing that we can do is, of course, isolate this and just draw another one, right? So for instance, I can draw a very particular shape, maybe like an I-beam, for instance. So if I draw a shape there, I'm going to go back to my midpoint. And as you can see, smart tools don't always work. Oh, maybe. Nope. Doesn't always work, but that's okay. I'm going to fake it till I make it for today. And I can always trim things too. So I'm just going to draw 1/4 of it, just because I know I can mirror something. Right? And basically make an I-beam. So mirror again. And maybe sometimes it works. Oh, and sometimes it's in the wrong plane. Right? Sometimes you do have to kind of move around to make sure things are working. And yeah, you can use another view. Not that view, this view. So in our case, mirroring again, and of course using that to make an I-beam. Now from here, I'll take basically all of those without this one and trim it. So TRIM, and get rid of whatever I don't need. Right? In my case, I'm going to join that as much as possible. Make sure that it joins. If it doesn't join, I definitely have a problem here. I can join one at a time, or the letter J to join. Join. She would leave and her phone go on. Anyway. We'll make fun of her when she comes back. But you can see that, well, if things double up on each other, it's not the end of the world either. Honestly, I don't spend time on stuff, right? For me, just make a new one, right? In fact, here's my template for it. We'll just use our polyline and draw a new one. But sometimes you can create other things to make other things actually easier. So for instance, now I got that full curve, and I don't really need to worry about the rest. In fact, I'll delete it. Now I got a solid profile, and I didn't have to waste time over and over again. However, let's continue. Let's say how we're going to do it. Sweep tool, right? So sweep 1. In my case, it's actually going to ask for those one at a time. So it's going to ask for the rail first. Then it's going to ask for the shape. Enter. It's going to ask for the direction, which really doesn't matter yet. And enter. In my case, I do want to close the sweep. Well, not close the sweep, but I do want to cap it. Or make solid if I have the ability. Doesn't look like I have the ability yet, and close sweep isn't working because you do need 2 profiles to do that. So I'll hit sweep and cap. Awesome. Just like that, we have steel beam. Alright, so definitely not bad. And well, I'm not going to do that all over again. I'm going to use my grid, right, and the intersections of my grid in order to copy those. Right, so I'll take the intersection, in my case that little piece right there that you can barely see, and just snap it into place. Right? Why would I do that over and over again? Right? That would be silly. Right, so I'll take those and really do the exact same thing. Copy. I usually copy things to in place. You can also hit the letter I when you hit copy, and just simply move these. I'm going to kind of fake it till I make it. After all, I am being sculptural. Copy. And of course, you can be as accurate as possible. But just like that, we have a grid system. So really a lot going on there. But to be fair, even in a rendered view, starting to look like steel. Just like that. Right? Something you can already use in Studio. Now, what if Professor Garcia comes by and she goes, those steels you need more length out of them, right? Oh, okay. Well, I'll take each of those. Well, maybe not the lines. In fact, actually, I think we could do this while getting the lines. So I'll take everything, hold shift and get everything. And I can simply use gumball and make them a little longer. Just like that, right? Just on basic principle. However, I do think that looks a little funny. And basically for the sculpture today, we don't need any grids on the floor, but we do need some grids in the air, right? So in my case, let's take that and copy it. I'm going to give myself 3 or 4 levels, not a big deal here. I didn't actually specify. I'll leave that up to you, but essentially we'll be making something. So I do want to set up for that. I'm going to go with there and there. In fact, I'm going to lift this one off the ground and maybe stick to a golden ratio. Right, so I kind of want that to be square. You'll notice that I've missed some, so I do want to make sure that I don't mess up too hard. Make sure you get everything. Right, and of course move it accordingly. So I'm going to go with 3 levels, sort of level 1, level 2, level 3, and maybe a roof. No foreshadowing there. But yeah, let's get sculptural. Right? Obviously we have these pieces, we have some sort of grid. The last thing that I need is really the vertical component, and honestly the 2-point perspective is kind of getting to me, so I'm going to go ahead and restart that to an isometric, and that's looking a little bit better for me. Yeah, there we go. It was looking a little like wobbly when I moved around, so just in case that's you, of course you can change those things too. From here though, I'm like, oh man, I kind of messed up my points here. I should have left it maybe on the ground. Good thing I make a copy of these things. Now it looks like I accidentally got all the others, and that's okay too. That's just because of the view. So I'll go ahead and move that. Lock that into place. And of course move it. Just to keep that there. Now the next thing I can do is make some columns, right? We're still technically working on the grid here. So in my case, I could go with a regular circle. I could. Right? I mean, that's definitely not a bad column. I don't want to go too thick. I'll probably stay within kind of that same 6 inches. So I'm going to go with like a 3-inch diameter. And I could essentially just pipe them, right? However, if I just start off with the circle and not necessarily the pipe, right? Another thing that I can do is actually copy these over and over again. So again, taking my intersection points. And I'll do actually a couple of different ones for the sake of tutorial today. I personally like the Mies van der Rohe column, so I'll probably make one of those. Oop, and if you mess up, it's okay. You can always delete the one that's messed up and kind of just keep going. Now, instead of doing this over and over again, another thing that I could do is just do it once, copy. Again, the power of copying in this program, pretty amazing. You could do it that way. You could also make your own, right? Please don't use triangles, Brandon, right? because they really won't go together very well. I would say circles, squares, and be at least architectural, the I-beams. And to be fair, one like Mies van der Rohe uses kind of the opposite of an I-beam, much more like a plus sign. So we can definitely make one of those. I'll use my poly tool for this one and kind of stay within this boundary. So for instance, I only have to make 1/4, right? So again, I'm not going to go for super accurate today, as you can see. But I do want to make it easier on myself, so I'll take that one, mirror it, and take those two, join it, and mirror it again. Get a little bit more of a Mies van der Rohe piece there. Join them. Make sure they do join, because the next step we'll definitely need that. But let's do a couple of those, and maybe a little bigger. Go big or go home, right? But let's try those out. So I'm going to take all of these. Awesome. Well, I'm not sure what that is, but let's get rid of it. There we go. And that one. And let's take that piece, copy, and just move it into place. In my case, selecting that frame. And checking it out. Should be somewhere, I'd imagine it's somewhere inside here, and that's okay. I'm just going to select it all and extrude. After all, it's only going to extrude what I can extrude. I definitely don't want the edges, so get those out of there. And let's go ahead and type extrude. If you've never extruded before, you'll see that immediately we can make pretty much anything. And as you can see, it got all the lines that were in there. So that's okay, I just delete those. But it didn't get my columns, oh no. Maybe I didn't copy it right. Oh, that's because they're all at the top. Look at that. Well, even better actually. We'll just take all of those at the top and extrude them down. Sweet. I can even line up to that extent that I created and make it actually a lot easier for myself. And just like that, guys, how many of you guys sit there forever doing this in a physical model? I used to, with a bunch of dowels and a bunch of things, and my goodness, I wish I would have just known this the whole time, right? However, it does teach you a lot about structure and how those things will work. But now we have a frame. We have some sort of system that we can lock all these now digital parts to, right? So that's looking pretty good so far. We'll go to shaded. How am I on time? Right, 45 minutes, let's do it. So from here, let's go ahead and make the rest of the shapes. In my case, I might have messed up. Oh, thank goodness, I still had it there. So we are good to go. However, you can hatch something, you can extrude that as well, but really for the sake of tutorial, let's get sculptural, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and take a few things, extrude, and start thinking about some walls and pieces. I'm gonna go ahead and switch my layers and extrude. In your case, I would definitely make a new layer, right? But that's looking pretty sweet. I like it, but it's still actually flat, right? I mean like mathematically flat. It literally has no thickness. The only reason it's showing us thickness is because it's a computer, right? But if I was to 3D print this, nothing would come out, right? Because it's not actually thick, right? It has no dimension. In our case, let's add some dimension to it. So I can offset surface, not just lines, but now I can offset surfaces as well. So I'm going to take that surface. I'm going to say, well, man, I kind of want a 6-inch wall here. So I'm going to type in 6 inches, enter. I do want the arrows to go out. If I wanted them to go in, I could click on them or click on them again. Press enter. And of course, now we get some awesome thickness. In my case, I had a fillet also involved. Honestly, I'm not mad about it. It kind of looks good. But if we didn't want that, let's try that again. So let's take the surface. Let's type in offset surface, offset surf. In our case, you'll see that there's some options to fillet some things like round and sharp. I'm going to go with sharp, but you can control the fillet as well. And let's go with, I don't know, maybe a thicker wall. I'm going to go 12 inches, go big or go home. I do want that to go the other way, and enter. Awesome. So again, just like that, we have some thickness to our walls. And that's looking kind of crazy at the bottom. And to be fair, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the bottom. In fact, I have all these wonderful grids that could potentially hold up my design. In fact, knowing very well that this is just a 2-dimensional drawing on the ground, these don't even have to be in the same spot. In fact, maybe one's up here, one's down there, and maybe one gets a little bit longer. After all, I can use Gumball to be a little bit more sculptural. Maybe they overlap at some area. That's kind of nice. Not too shabby. Maybe I use it kind of as my anchor. Maybe it does go all the way down. Fair enough. And not looking too shabby. Obviously, it looks like the grid's going to hold it up. That is kind of important. And obviously, if you've seen some of the past projects and observation towers, yes, you're doing the same one, right? Not to give too much away, because I would say for this assignment, you're just making sculpture. Don't get too carried away. You're not making necessarily an observation tower yet. So I don't want to see roofs. I don't want to see floors. I just want to see sculpture, right? And for good reason, because we're just learning the program and how we can use it for studio. And let's face it, how many times in studio do they just give you the prompt at the very beginning? Probably not a lot, right? Usually it's kind of a process of abstraction and information and sight and all these things that come together to make a final project. So I don't want to necessarily get us out of the same alignment as studio. However, I'm looking at my columns and they are looking a little thin, but that's okay for today. I will say, just be cognizant of that. I probably should have gone with 12 inches there, just because I had some pretty big I-beams going on, but that's okay. Let's keep going. In fact, we could get a little bit rhythmic about this, so I'm going to go ahead and copy, or not copy, but extrude. I kind of like these little delicate curvilinear things going on, but I kind of want to see them in rhythm. So let's give that some thickness first. So offset surface. And let's go with 6 inches, enter. Oh. Make sure you click on the surface, not the line, because you can't offset surfaces that aren't surfaces. Sweet. From there, I'm going to make a couple of copies. I'm going to switch to another view. And I kind of want some rhythm involved, so I'm going to use that there. It's looking kind of nice, kind of locked into those positions. I'm going to go ahead and copy. I don't know, I kind of want to get some rhythm in there. Because why not, right? And I get to decide how big or small they really are. But relatively speaking, I want you to start thinking about spatial, right? And if it helps, go to your rendered view. Check it out with some shade and shadow, right? Can definitely be telling about what's going on in the object. Another thing that could be really nice is we can already apply shade and shadow as I showed you guys last time. So, for instance, right, we could type in spotlight, or spot, honestly. In my case, I just need to make a circle on the ground and sort of move it. And as you can see, it immediately starts producing some shadows for us. Now, unfortunately, you can't see a spotlight in the rendered view, as I was mentioning last time. And more or less, you know, sometimes you actually have to turn off your sun. So if you click on sun or turn on the sun, right? So sometimes either or of those. But in our case, I'm kind of mimicking the sun, so I'm going to take that point, if you will. Take that point, if you will, and of course make it a little bit more sun-like. In my case, moving that dot. And once you click on the object itself, you can move, of course, the entire object. But again, what's really nice is we can do this without even touching a material, without even cutting our hands, without even spinning a dime on some chipboard or basswood, right? And that's actually pretty crazy. And a lot of potential there in studio. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't know a single professor that will look at your Rhino screen. Maybe me in this classroom, right? But really in studio, a good rule of thumb is always produce some sort of tangible drawing that your professor can doodle on. Well, that's great because, well, I can produce the shade and shadow quality. Bam, just like that. So we can already start to see what shade and shadows are going to actually happen. I mean, that's pretty intense. And for any of you guys that just took graphics too, you're like, oh my gosh, this is practically cheating, right? You know, but in that sense, it's not, right? Of course, we use the tools necessary. I'm going to put my ground plane in there, and it doesn't look like it wants to show ground plane, and that can be really nice. But how many of you guys spent days calculating these things? All right, I mean, I think I have 2 spotlights going on, by the way, so might obviously have to get rid of one. If you do need to get rid of one, I believe you can actually type in lights, enter. And it'll actually give you all the lights that are in the drawing. So like the skylight. Skylight's actually probably one of the best tools. It really, if yours isn't looking like realistic, skylight is usually the reason. The sun is pretty good, but again, as last time, it will create a new shadow and things like that. And it does look like I have 2 spotlights in there, so I can turn one off and of course turn one back on. But again, immediate results that I can show my studio professors, which is quite nice. Now, what if they're kind of stickler about the material or maybe the glass? Well, this is where it gets fun, right? You can click on any material or any object, and to be fair, I should probably make some more objects, but we'll get there. We do have some time. But maybe I actually want to make these some sort of transparency or blue glass or, I don't know, green, or it really depends on the project, I suppose. But for instance, we're going to go to our properties. So in our case, it's a little color wheel. And I like mine up here. So I'm going to put my color wheel up there. And it looks like a little paint tube. I don't know why, but it is a little paint tube. You'll notice you do have to click on the object first. And now we're telling it in its properties to be a different material. So in that case, you'll see it says, well, not a lot of options here. And we can use default materials, but in our case, we're going to click on this. And well, I do have some by default, but in my case, I'm going to go ahead and make a new one. In my case, it does have some preset defaults, right? So for instance, we have a blend mode, custom, emissions. This is like if I wanted to make smoke. Obviously, this is an all-use program, right? In fact, I was realizing, I saw a survey that said, actually, Rhino is mostly used for product design, shoes, funny enough. Or actually, pretty much 9 times out of 10, if you see a shoe out in the real world, it was probably designed in Rhinoceros. But lo and behold, there is a lot of things that seem kind of like polyester, plaster, plastic. One of my favorite materials to use is plastic. Why? Because it's the most versatile, and for some reason, it just kind of feels right. I think it has like a nice rendered view. Don't get me wrong, a lot of us gravitate towards glass because we're like, oh yeah, I use glass in the windows. Be careful, there's not a lot of options, and it's extremely scientific. You have to understand that the digital world is trying to replicate what? It's a simulation of what? Reality. So very often, you'll find actually that this program teaches you about reality a little bit, like a specular highlight. Anybody know what a specular highlight is? Anybody draw anime? It's those little shimmering white lights that are on the eyeballs of the anime characters. Those are specular highlights. And we could definitely add that to any material, right? But you have to know what specular highlights are, right, to say the very least. But so for today, I'm going to use plastic, right, just to kind of show you what we can do with it. And yes, I can make plastic look like glass, right? Now, this only shows up in the rendered view, by the way. You'll notice if I'm in shaded, still green, still doesn't do anything. So don't get me wrong, if your computer isn't strong enough to just work in the rendered mode, please use the school computer because they are monsters at rendering. In fact, it is just insane, the graphics card that are in each of these, roughly at about $2,000 per computer. Anyway, but we can also change the color there still too. So if I did want to make them sort of glass-like and sort of have a kind of a blue tint to them, keep in mind like a strong blue isn't, like look at this glass for instance. Does it look blue, guys? No, it's just clear, right? So don't get me wrong, it's okay to have a little bit of blue in there, but be honest with yourself. It's not actually blue, even though, yes, we were all taught in kindergarten that trees are green, bark is brown, grass is green, sky is blue, but if you really go look outside, there's like 16 million colors going on. Let's be honest and actually realize that there's actually a lot of reflection in this as well. Now, I can't really control reflection yet, but I will show a couple materials. That's looking pretty good. I do want it a little bit more noticeable, but definitely not bad. Definitely transparent and starting to get somewhere, right? To say the very least. And on a dime, right? So that's already looking pretty sweet. What about this material, right? Or this polysurface? In fact, maybe I want to get a few of them. Hopefully I layered my stuff correctly, and I don't think I did. So let's turn off some things. Okay, that looks like the layer I used. So let's go with that. Let's switch to that layer and undo. Oh, thank goodness. So definitely worth your time in terms of layering these three-dimensional items. As you can see, it can make it a lot easier to select them, just like in any other program. But again, I want to go to my materials, and let's go, I don't know, maybe I do want something metallic, like a metal, right? Maybe it is kind of this steel, but it's not a mirror, right? It's not mirrored steel, right? Which is what comes in by default. So in our case, I'm going to switch, make another layer. You'll see that I still have my plastic layer. That's kind of nice because if I want to use it again, it's already ready to go. So keep in mind you can isolate one of these one at a time, right? In my case, I'm going to start off with a new one, and we do have a metal layer, just to kind of show you what these presets look like. Metal is not exactly customizable, right? There's not a lot going on here. We can change the color and the texture. That's about it, right? So maybe I don't want to use metal. Let's try something else. Let's go with custom. That's got to have a lot of options. Oh crap, maybe too many options, right? In fact, how many of you guys know what let's make that a little bit bigger. How many of you guys know what a blue number is? Yeah, me neither, right? So again, not everything is exactly useful, right? And like I said, it's actually trying to mimic reality. Like if you're trying to understand what a tan sip is, again, I honestly still don't know what that is, and I'd probably have to look it up. So again, well, here we have some reflectivity, we have some transparency, and gloss finish. So some really nice options here that we could probably use anyway, right? So in my case, I'm going to switch the color to some more of a steel color, so kind of go in a gray, and I could pick some defaults there. Press apply. I want a little bit of reflectivity. But if I wanted to reflect the sky being blue, well, what would I do? Reflect a sky being blue, right? And I don't want transparent glass looking metal, so again, I can definitely overdo it, and I do want a little bit of a gloss finish. And voila. Just like that, we've got some steel. You notice the blue tint to it? That's kind of my 2 cents, by the way. Brandon, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, sorry. I'm not even playing.
Oh, no, not you, Brandon. I thought he was raising his hand.
No.
All good. But yeah, hopefully you can see that there's even kind of a blue tint to that. And already it's looking pretty realistic, right? Let's turn on some other objects. And voila, right? I mean, materialization without having to really do anything, right? However, let's say I have a particular Verret studio. He only wants to see basswood and he only wants to see chipboard. Okay, well, let's try that again. In fact, let's turn off some things again. And again, reselect. And let's go for maybe a basswood look. Again, I'm going to use plastic because it's easier to work with. But I can make as many as I like. So again, go to my material tools. I'm going to make a new one, plastic. In my case, I'm going to go with kind of a beige, orangey color to kind of mimic the basswood that it is. And I'm going to go with a little bit of Chanty, whatever that is. I'm just kidding. In my case, you can actually load these in too. I usually prefer a leather just because it's quickly available. But you can actually load those in as well. I don't want any reflectivity. I mean, when's the last time you looked at wood and you were like, oh my God, right? No, it has actually close to no reflectivity, so I'm going to take that out. And clarity, I'm going to kind of make it all bumpy too, right? And it's starting to look a little yellowy. What's kind of nice about this is as long as I've applied this to the layer, if I go back to that layer of, say, one of them, right, and I make the change, it's going to change all of them. But again, that's because I established them all in that layer. So just to kind of give you a hint of how this program is working. Now, I kind of like a little orangey basswood in there. So that's looking at least doable. If you have to, get a piece of basswood and kind of like, compare and contrast. It would be nice to get some gloss in here and change the color a little bit. But, for the sake of argument, it looks like basswood, right? To say the very least. Of course, I can go back to my layers and turn some things back on. And voila, right? Maybe I need some chipboard, so maybe let's change those to chipboard. So in my case, let's make a new material. To be fair, I just use plastic or sometimes even a plaster to kind of give it that texture, right? So I'll hit plaster, and as you can see, all we can do is change the color. So that might not be great, but I can at least change the texture. So I'm going to go with a plaster and switch that to a very light gray. And just like that, notes, chipboard. So that might be kind of nice, especially if I'm working in a group or something like that. And voila, right? And what's nice is, well, you're not going to see it so much in the render view, but you'll kind of start to see that it manipulates the shadows a little bit. Again, adding that Toy Story 4 look. Now, coming through all the details, that perfection. Anyway. Starting to look pretty good. Let's continue and make sure that we're finishing all of the steps. Compose a 3D model. Yeah, totally what I'm doing. Now show 3 minimum iterations. So let's finish up a little bit because we do have some time. But now that we know how to materialize something, And let's go ahead and hide this spotlight because it's kind of demanding, if you will. And this is kind of getting demanding too, so I'm just going to hide it. Sweet. And let's continue. Right, we've already got some of my items, and I may want to delete those or hide them over time. But let's get some more thickness in here, some more variations, if you will. So let's get some pieces. I can extrude those as well. Oh, I gotta extrude the curve or extrude the surface itself. Give me the curve. Doesn't want to. What can I do if I lost the curve? Well, I can actually generate a curve. So if you go to Gen, and, well, maybe it's not called generation anymore. Let's call curve. Usually it's called curve from hatch or hatch from curve. Maybe it has changed. I wouldn't be surprised. Hatch style. Might be called outline, I believe. No? Usually it's generate outline. Would help if I could see better. Maybe it's gone. Perhaps there's a new setting. You can take usually any hatch or any object and you can turn it back into a curve, which is really nice and nice to show. But usually it's called generate from hatch. And I don't even see the word generate. Am I spelling generate correctly, guys? Pretty sure. Huh, maybe it's gone. Well, it might still be in Rhino 7, so I would definitely check it out if you can. However, I can also make 2D, but of a different view. And really get that back. I can't even do it to a hatch now? What? Alright, well, things change. Things change for sure. So definitely make sure that you don't get rid of the curves that you use. In this case, I still have that one, so we're okay. But let's go ahead and extrude. And in our case, I do want to keep it solid and maybe get some levels in there or some different items, right? Some planes, if you will, right? So I'm going to take that one, float it up a little bit. I can even put it on top of the structure itself. You know, we are going for somewhat architectural. So I'll place it on top, fake it till I make it. Actually, I kind of want to get a few of those involved, so let's get a few copies. I like the way they're slicing and dicing. And another thing to mention is that you can still cut from here as well. So, for instance, you may realize that just extruding everything is really made this really kind of hard to look at. You can't see the inner spaces and you can't see what's going on. I just want to throw out there, just like my D1 assignment, that you can still cut from it. So, I mean, shoot, what's the best way to cut through something? Anybody? Wire cut. Now this is where it could get kind of nice, right? We could take this circle and I kind of want to go halfway through here. You know, I'm particular about the way I cut stuff. So I'm going to cut through this entire piece based on, again, you know, some locked in geometry. I don't want it to be too random. Sweet. Let's take a look at that. And if we have to, let's recenter on it. Awesome. Where are we? Seriously. Oh, we're way over here. Whee! So let's take that piece and wire cut it. What do you want to wire cut? Well, I want to wire cut this, that, and that. Enter. I don't want to go that way, so I'll switch the direction. Go straight all the way through. And voila. We can still do some pretty awesome things in elevation. So let's recenter that. Sweet. So you can definitely still do things like this, right? I mean, don't overdo it, right? But absolutely, right? I mean, that's a wonderful, lovely curve going on in there. Anyway, love those. But let's say I was done. I got all the pieces, I extruded everything. In fact, I probably still should just keep extruding stuff just for the sake of what more or less I want you to produce. So let's say there, let's join those. Some of you guys are probably working diligently right now. That's okay too. Let's go with 6 inches. Sweet. Let's move it up. And it's already looking pretty good. I don't want to go too far into it, but I don't want to miss some of the cool lines that I did. Like that curve right there. Come on, we got to get that guy involved. So extrude. Let's go big. Let's give it some thickness. Very thin, maybe. Maybe it's just glass or some sort of clear material. So offset surface. And let's go super thin, maybe 1 inch. Awesome. And let's go ahead and move that up. Ooh, kind of goes through that circle. I kind of like that. Again, sculptural, artistic. Is it something that you would have printed on a shirt or printed out and enjoy looking at, right? So definitely kind of going for that visual composition, right? Just to say the very least. However, now the assignment. So theoretically, we'll have all 3 of these, right? And let's go ahead and turn on all my layers. So we do need 3 of these, right? However, they can come from a lot of the same things. So keep that in mind. Maybe the differences from them, maybe I do the composition once, I rotate it a couple times, maybe move some things around, but maybe I do something very different in the 3-dimensional realm, right, in the Z. However, they can all be very different. I'm looking at Leon and he's like, challenge accepted, right? You know, I'm gonna make very different ones and that's okay too. But again, you don't have to overthink it. Again, at the end of the day, guys, we're not gonna do what we do in studio. We're not going to be like, well, you could have done this a little bit better here and this a little bit better there. I will talk about how visually interesting it is, right, to have these kind of inner spaces and outer spaces. And of course, if you took me for D1, this is kind of a recap, right, if you will, of that first project. But in a sense, now it's going to become something, as you guys probably may or may not know, some sort of observation tower. Oh man, I can't forget this last octagon. I mean, come on. Right. Oh, you know what? I kind of want to make that one rhythmic. So one thing that I can do to make, that I haven't showed yet, is we can array something, just in case you haven't used that before. So I'm going to array it. And let's say I want, I don't know, like 8 of them. But I want them to all be equally spaced. So in my case, I want 8 of them in the, I just want one in the Y direction, and I probably should have chose the right number, but in our case, let's just see what it shows. You can click, and of course, as you can see, you can immediately make as many as you want at a perfect distance from each other. Now, I chose the wrong direction, so let's try that again. In my case, I wanted 1 in the X direction, and 8 in the Z direction. Z direction, of course, meaning up and down. In my case, I don't know, that didn't look like enough to me, so I'm going to go with 12. Again, click. And it looks like I chose the wrong direction again. How I know is because I can't see it. But make sure you choose the right direction. So let's try that again. Maybe it's 8 in the Y. So again, sometimes you got to use all 3. And make sure you finish. What? Okay, let's try the Z. I could have swore it was the Z. And 8. I was right. What is going on? Anyway, let's try one last time. Maybe let's see if it's the view itself. You know what? I'm going to do that in this view. Try array again. Maybe it's the X direction? It's worth trying, I suppose. Well, that didn't even work at all. In fact, one way you can know is if you accidentally made 12 items. But one last chance. Let's show array. 1 in the X, 1 in the Y, and 12 in the Z. Of course, I want to click. There we go. So if I wanted instant rhythm and keep that, I'll hit enter. Can be nice when you actually hit it the first time. Visually interesting to say the very least. Some of them are floating, and that's okay for today. Obviously, it won't be okay when we 3D print it or laser cut it, but it's okay for today. It's sculptural. And let's see how it's looking so far. Rendered view, not too shabby. In fact, I can take all these pieces and change their materials. I'm gonna go with I don't know, metal. It's definitely nice. Kind of see that kind of glare and reflection that we have going on for it. The reason I chose metal is so that we could possibly even see that they're octagonal, but as you can see, it's not too great. Another way is to just simply use plastic. My favorite thing to do is just add some color. So, I don't know, I definitely like the color red. And there's just something kind of nice and soft really about that. I'm gonna go with a little bit less reflectivity, actually a little bit more. Kind of like that glare to it. But again, maybe I actually want to change some things so that I can see them a little bit better, so I'd change them to red. But again, I only have to make that layer once. But again, quite nice. It kind of grays out some certain areas to really kind of give it that plastic and more realistic feel. But already can definitely tell what's going on. So again, I would probably use color in this assignment to actually show off some of the key items that I want you to focus on or look at, right? But let's say I was done. And last but not least, I need to generate some views. And I need a floor plan. Floor plan. Obviously air quotes there. So I need to show 3 iterations, 1 each on 11 by 17, and 1 plan view and 1 perspective. So most of us probably know how to do this already, right? I've gone over a little bit in the assignments, but we need that original, right? So don't get rid of it. Don't accidentally move it like I did, right? So I'll show you what to do if you accidentally move it, right? Maybe select 1 at a time. That might be the easiest if you don't have a lot of lines going on. And just move it. Right, not a big deal. But yeah, it's looking pretty sweet. So we'll take the original and we'll make our 11 by 17s. So again, rectangle, 11 feet by 17 feet. Again, just to get that ratio, rotate and make it a little bit bigger because there is no scale. And I'm gonna need eventually 3 artboards. So 1, 2, 3. I am gonna need the floor plan of each. So obviously this is for the sake of tutorial, but I need floor plan, maybe iteration number 2 and iteration number 3. In fact, what would even make that better is if I made them in the same spot, right? It would communicate pretty well. In fact, that's what I'll do. I'll take a similar spot and of course use that to copy. Now of course in your case they'll all be different, right? And last but not least, we want a rendered view. Two-point perspective would be nice. To be fair, in the past some students go, well, can I do an interior and an exterior? That's fine. But let's practice a little bit our 2-point perspectives, right? Because most of us have probably nailed the isometric, right? We've even got some of the isometric views in exercise 2. So let's get a 2-point perspective involved and make it actually set view to 2-point perspective. A little bit of drama in there, right? Not too much drama, right, to be safe. But I do want to go over some of the ways that we can actually control this camera. So by default, the camera doesn't actually show. It doesn't actually show what I'm doing yet. So if I type in camera, enter, keep in mind that it's going to make a camera for the current viewport that I'm in. So I definitely don't want the top view. I want to make sure that I'm in the 2-point perspective view and type in camera. Once I do that, I want to show my camera. And you'll see immediately we have this cone of vision, right? I've probably gone over this a couple times. But what's nice is, of course, we can manipulate it. So if you check it out, we can really dial in what this object looks like. In fact, if you've ever seen an animation of something, it probably has a similar way of showing it and making it. That being the case, let's choose maybe a regular tall person. Maybe, I don't know, we'll draw a line if I must, and draw 6 feet. Hey man, I almost nailed that. Oh wait, is that 6 feet? No way. Let's try that again. 6 feet, enter. Okay, there we go. So that's a 6-foot man or woman. And more or less, we can show exactly what it looks like from that view. Now, if I zoom in and zoom out, you'll notice immediately the cone changes. So be very careful because you can't edit, undo, or redo the camera. It's really showing you a live view of what's going on. However, some of us are particularly better at just kind of manipulating the view until we get what we want. And let's say that was the view I wanted. And maybe dial it back just a little bit. There we go. And again, we can actually change the drama too. Well, if you're not screen recording. For some reason when I screen record, this one doesn't work. However, it should work for you. Let's see what else doesn't work. Yeah, for some reason the center point doesn't work either. That's okay. Another thing that we can do is we can select the camera itself. So again, sometimes you have to retype in camera. And you can toggle and hide it back as well. Really, funny enough, all three of those buttons do the exact same thing. However, they do them based on the viewport, so do be careful. Some of us will accidentally get a cone facing down, and of course that's the top view, right? But let's talk about rendering just a little bit because it can get pretty fancy. So once we've established a view, what do we do next? Well, let's save that view, right? So we can totally use it, right, Patricia? So we'll set that view, go to named views. In my case, we'll add another one and save it. So 2-point perspective and even exercise 3. Sweet. I can go back to that view. There's nothing there because I hid everything. But again, always double check and make sure you got the right view. Now I'm going to turn off my spotlights, and I kind of want to go with the sun on this one. So I'm going to type in lights and turn off that one and actually put the sun back. And I want to control the sun a little bit more. Again, there's kind of a plus to using the sun because you can switch it to manual control and dial it in pretty nice, but I do want to get some of these materials to show up a little bit better. So maybe I can change the direction of the sun and really the direction here too. So that's looking pretty sweet. Oh, kind of a softness to it. And also change the intensity. Oh my god, the sun's blowing up. Anyway. But I do want to give it a little bit of contrast, right? Not too much, not too little, but just right. And I kind of like the shadows on the ground too, but it's not really showing the shadows on the ground. Sometimes this is actually an issue with the graphics card. If you are running to a point where you don't see the shadows on the ground, let me know, and we can definitely troubleshoot that. For me, I definitely know it's because I'm screen recording and probably in this view, but definitely trust it out. You can also change the shadows in your settings as well. So if you go to settings, play around with some of these a little bit, right? You'll notice that there's 2 setting bars in Rhino. You can go to File and also Settings, and very different settings, right, to say the very least. However, from here, we can actually control all the render settings. So again, really nice here. Let's go ahead and actually produce our first render. We can change the style, we can change the environment, the studio, and the lighting of this. So again, this could be another reason why your shadows aren't showing up. If you selected something that doesn't necessarily show the shadows, right, can definitely be it. However, a better way to find this is also right-clicking on the render ball and selecting the second one, right? In our case, it's actually going to start producing that rendered view, and relatively quickly. I'm surprised actually it went that fast for mine. However, there's a lot of stuff going on. As you can see, I removed the background in mine. I don't necessarily want that. It's not exactly the greatest quality. So let's change some things, right? In our case, right-click. If you right-click on the render ball, it brings up those same settings that we were just now looking at. In our case, we can select a 3-dimensional environment. I really like these because it even has the light in there, which is pretty cool. Keep in mind that it does change the lighting though, right? Some of the 3-dimensional environments and different environments actually do change the lighting. In our case, you can turn these off as well, right? So for instance, I can turn off the sun in here, I can turn off the skylight, and as you can see, it can make quite the difference. But there's also studio lighting. We can also select the plus box, and there's tons of presets as well, right? So if you go to import, holy cow, there's a lot, and in fact, you can actually make these your own as well. I won't go over that, and to be fair, I do wish there was more of a preview than just some of these. You do have to kind of just load them in and see what they produce. But let's try Rhino Studio 8. That's probably exactly what we had. And as you can see, not a whole lot of difference going on there. However, we can still change the intensity. Okay. Let's try another one. I think there's one in here called Seattle, which I find pretty cool. But we have multiple different studios, different lighting abilities. Let's try the warehouse. So that is actually just going to change the lighting, but what's kind of funny is it probably should change the reflections of the lighting. So let's see what that produces. Please don't freeze. Didn't change much. In fact, I just see like a slight green in there. Keep in mind, we just changed the lighting studio, right? So let's actually change that to also the warehouse. Oh, there's the warehouse. And as you can see, literally the image of a warehouse, right? So don't get me wrong, not exactly useful for what we're doing. And please do not use warehouse. But let's try some other ones out. And as you can see, it loads them for us as we choose them. There is another good one in here called like Toronto Downtown. They do have a second to load. But it is starting to look weird, right? I mean, it's like we're in a three-dimensional view. Oh my gosh, what if I just got San Antonio? How many of you guys spend time getting Google Maps and getting the street view and getting it behind our objects only for it to look absolutely fake? Well, in our case, what's nice is that the image itself is to the scale of the image or the object that's being shown. A real game changer for some of us. But lo and behold, the only drawback is if I change the sun quality, guess what? The studio doesn't change, right? It's actually just an image, right? Being wrapped around in a gigantic ball around our model. But it does look pretty realistic. As soon as I move though, as you can see, it looks like we're actually there, right? To say the very least. However, to be fair, some views look better than others, right? And no, I'm really just trying to show off actually the ability of this. The ones that I really prefer to choose are like the Studio A through these, right? Check those out a little bit because they are pretty nice in terms of lighting quality. You can definitely, it almost looks like it's in a room, right? Remember how I was saying design that model? That way we can of course produce that for our studio. That might be the best view too. And that might not be, right? Right, sometimes, at least I can hear one of my professors, never show the light in the view, right? And he was probably definitely right. In my case, I do need to switch back to my actual view, so I do want to go to Set View, Named Views, and double click. Make sure that I get that same view again. But let's say I was done, and I need to hide everything else so that I can produce my render. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that real quick. As you can see, double click back on my view. Oh no, where'd it go? It's still there. Oh, maybe I hit it. Oh, I hit it. There we go. So let's hide everything but that. Why does it keep doing that? Oh, I'm hiding the wrong one, that's why. So let's hide all that because I don't want that in the background of my render. So hide. Again, not that view. Come on. Set view, back to top. Double click. Sweet. So now that we want to produce our rendered view, let's go ahead and do so. It's got some pretty nice shadows going on there. And let's go ahead and produce. So again, I forgot to talk about more of these settings. All right, there really is a lot here. And you'll notice I'll just kind of go through them as quickly as possible as we have 4 minutes left. So in my case, I can control the size of the image. I would go 4K, you know, but it is going to take a lot longer. For the sake of studio, we'll go with 2K today. And I'll go with kind of a final quality because who doesn't want final quality? I'm going to go with a simpler background. In my case, I can go with no environment or just a regular studio. And it'd be nice once these are loaded, they kind of stay loaded, which is really nice. Definitely not that one. And maybe Studio E, but I don't like the light in the background, so I'm going to go with that one, at least for today. In my case, I can leave a transparent background, but that's why I was getting that weird fuzzy line, so I'm going to unclick that because I don't want a transparent background. I want to use my ground plane so that it produces some shadows on the ground, so definitely want that. And I can even use a material if I wanted to and load that material, right, if I want to, right? I can even use those same materials that I was just loading. So plastic, I can make it look like water. In my case, I'll just leave that blank. So in my case, just regular. And from here, I'll type render or hit render. And it will produce that drawing. Now you'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner, it's actually putting together a bunch of multiple shots, right? And the reason why it needs that is because, well, in order to get a high quality render, it needs multiple pieces. When we take a screenshot of our screen, it's going to the DPI of the screen. Now, if you have a Macintosh, it's usually a pretty good DPI. However, most Windows DPIs is actually kind of a faux DPI. It's really about 150 DPI, or sometimes even worse, 72 DPI, which is just awful quality. So don't get me wrong, screenshot was fine for exercise 1 and 2, but I may be producing my final drawings here, right? I may be actually wanting to line up some really good stuff and have no pixelation in that image. And you'll notice, once it's done making 1,500 shots, and that actually is pretty quick for screen recording, you'll notice that we have the ability to zoom in on it, and we can really, really zoom in on this, right? In fact, I think if you have a track bar, yeah, we can really zoom in. Oh, maybe not today. There we go. But obviously a lot less pixelated compared to our screenshot. Really diving into the reflections and the colors, matching some of those materials, and actually starting to even look like basswood, right? But more or less, once we're finished, I mean, look how crisp that looks. I mean, it's pretty nice. Right here, we'll definitely save it and turn it into either a PNG, a JPEG, and you'll notice there's no PDF option because a PDF is not technically an image file. But in our case, I could take this and, what do you know, stick that in Photoshop and make it my own, right? And even further make it really nice. So let's say test image. And I believe I will end it there for today. But relatively speaking, to make sure that we get into everything, because I can always continue that as well. We do want to produce 3, so let's type in show. Make sure that you are coming up with 3 different iterations, right? That way you can select one and we can move on to the next assignments. Otherwise, I will have to end it for today. It is already 10:30, guys, and I usually try to let you out by now. So we'll end it there for today.